ببخشید به سیستمتون انتقاد کردم، ببخشید صدام در اومده اعتراض کردم، جبران میکنم اگه اشتباه کردم، این موزیک رو بهتون بدهکارم من. به به این اجتماع، به به این نظام، دولت دال دلسوزی، به به این رجال، غرقیم تو رفاه دنیا بد شده.
درود بر شما. من محمد تاج دولتی هستم و با برنامه دیگر از مجموعه اعدام است با شما خواهم بود.
تو سطح تا کمر خم میشن، حتی یک روز همه آزادی رو نچشیدن.
حاکمان جمهوری اسلامی در طول دوران حیات 46 ساله این رژیم ایجاد رعب و وحشت را جایگزین گسترش شادی و سلامت کردند. هر دوره که به خاطر سیاست خارجی مداخله‌گرانه یا هسته‌ای کشور را در آستانه جنگ یا فشارهای سیاسی قرار داده‌اند، دامنه سرکوب و اعدام بالاتر رفته است. در روزهای اخیر شاهد اعدام گسترده زندانیان تحت عنوانهایی مثل جاسوسی برای اسرائیل و همکاری با دشمن هستیم. روز 12 مهر ماه رسانه‌های داخل ایران از اجرای حکم 7 زندانی سیاسی به نام‌های سامان محمدی خیاره، علی مجدم، معین خامفری، سالم موسوی، محمد رضا مقدم، عدنان قبیشاوی و حبیب دریس خبر دادند. در 9 ماه نخست سال جاری میلادی دست کم 1042 نفر در ایران اعدام شدند. سازمان حقوق بشر ایران تنها در ماه سپتامبر 171 اعدام را ثبت کرده است. اما چگونه میتوان از بند اعدام و نقض حقوق بشر گذشت؟ گذار از روزگار خشونت دینی و نقض حقوق بشر چگونه خواهد بود؟ سازمان حقوق بشر ایران در سالهای اخیر با نگاهی به نیاز به یک تغییر پایدار در جهت پایبندی حاکمان آینده به حقوق بشر توجه ویژه‌ای به آگاهی بخشی دارد. سلسله گفتگوهای برنامه‌های اخیر اعدام است در همین چارچوب تهیه و تنظیم شده است. یکی از مباحث مرتبط با دوران انتقال نیاز به حقیقتیابی در مورد ستمی است که بر میلیون‌ها شهروند رفته و حقوق آبی و محیط زیستی آنها به انواع مختلف نقض شده است. گروهی از همراهان و همکاران سازمان حقوق بشر در سالهای اخیر پژوهش در مورد فساد در این حوزه را با جدیت آغاز کرده و همچنان ادامه می‌دهند تا روزی که شرایط ایجاد یک کمیسیون حقیقتیاب آب و محیط زیست فراهم شد، بتوان پایه‌های مدیریت و حکمرانی آب و محیط زیست سالم را بنیان نهاد. این هفته نگاهی داریم به گفتگوی نیکاهنگ کوثر، روزنامه‌نگار حوزه آب و محیط زیست، با جف کانجان، حقوقدان، پژوهشگر و مدیر مؤسسه یونیشکا در آمریکا. گفتگویی درباره لزوم پاسخگو کردن ساختارهایی که آب و محیط زیست ایران را به سوی نیستی بردند.
وقتی متوجه میشیم که فجایعی که در محیط زیست ایران اتفاق افتاده تا چند درصد، تا چه بخشش دست انسان و مدیریت دولتی بوده، به این میاندیشیم که آیا نبایستی ساختاری پاسخگو بیاد و توضیح بده چه اتفاقی افتاده و چه باید کرد؟ وجود یک کمیسیون حقیقتیاب میتونه کمک بسیار بزرگی باشه به این مسئله. وجود کسانی که میان و فساد رو بررسی میکنن و نگاه میکنن که چه اشکال‌های وجود داشته در اجرای قانون و یا نادیده گرفته شدن قانون اهمیت پیدا میکنه. جف کانجان، مدیر مؤسسه یونیشکا در ایالات متحده، سالهاست که داره درباره فساد در عرصه‌های بین‌المللی تحقیق میکنه و مدتی پیش بر روی مسئله فساد در حوزه آب ایران هم تحقیق کرد. گفتگویی کردم با جف در ماه‌های گذشته که بخشای از اون رو در این برنامه با هم میبینیم. جف، تو سالها در ارتش آمریکا خدمت کردی. چطور وارد مسیر تحقیق درباره فساد شدی؟
How did I get into this? Did not come from money. I came from an average middle-class family. My mother was a school teacher, and so in order to pay my way to college, I joined the military. And one of the things that I was very good at was in-depth focus. So they allowed me to start researching for finance issues, terrorist finance and corruption issues. And I just took to it like a fish to water. And over the course of years, I learned how the politically exposed people hide their wealth, how they use beneficial ownership, etc. And so I became quite good at it. So after I retired from the military, I was out for about 17 days and I continued doing the exact same thing. They asked me if I would be interested in doing it as a contractor, so I said sure. And I've been doing it ever since, primarily for the United Nations, but also for the US, for the UK, for Sweden, for some Asian countries. But primarily what I'm interested in is the inequality that corruption brings and that injustice, and trying to fix that injustice as best I can. And so I've been doing it for more than a few days.
خب چطوری وارد تحقیق درباره فساد در حوزه آب ایران شدی؟
So I spent quite a bit of time in Iraq investigating corruption, and a lot of the corruption is focused through the PMF, the militias, and that naturally led me back to Iran. And part of what I was looking at was how politically exposed people are able to continue to get away with corruption. And what they do in order to do that is they divide the narrative. So what do I mean by that? Is they get one group blaming another group, and that group blaming a third group, and that group blaming a fourth group. And even though they may be in that mix, the narrative is divided among many, many people. So it's not focused on the people that are actually fomenting the corruption. And so Iran is probably the best place in the world to study corruption, because it is so rife with corruption, especially in water. And part of the problem that we have in Iran, especially as we're moving into the 21st century, is that there are going to be places on this earth that are uninhabitable. And unfortunately, Iran is on the forefront of that. Somewhere, maybe 12 provinces may be uninhabitable by the mid-century. And that's just not acceptable when it's something that can be solved when your government takes care of the people.
ما امروز در لاس وگاس نشستیم، شهری که شهرتش به پولشویی هم هست. کاری که جمهوری اسلامی در بسیاری از نقاط دنیا انجام داده. از جمله پولشویی هایی که برای رسوندن پول به نیروهای نیابتی صورت گرفته. چگونه میشه رد این پول ها رو گرفت؟
Yes, every dollar, even when it's sent on cryptocurrency, is traceable. And a lot of people get tired of the game, but let me explain the game a bit. When I was a kid, we used to play a game called whack-a-mole. And what would happen is you would have a chipmunk pop up, and then you'd hit it with a club and it would go down, and then it would pop up somewhere else, and you would hit it with a club and it would pop up. And that is much like chasing corruption in the world today. We find out where they are operating, how they are operating, and we go after it. We target it. We are eventually successful, but by that time they have moved to another type of operation that is also then attacked, and this is an ongoing process. So this is a day-to-day battle. Now, truly, the way to solve the issues of corruption are to study and research it so we know what motivates people. Why would somebody who's in a position of power bring themselves billions of dollars when their own people are suffering? That is very difficult for me to understand personally. And so That's why Iran is such a good research lab to understand and to follow it, because we get to see the techniques that they use for laundering money. We get to see how it moves around the world, from banking in Kazakhstan to casinos in Northern Africa to detergents or pharmaceuticals. There are so many ways that corrupt money can be laundered. We found one individual that had 114 beneficial owners. Now, to explain beneficial ownership, it means I'm trying to hide my money, so I'm not going to put it in my name. So I put it in my daughter's name. And then my daughter hires an attorney and they get someone else and they put it in the name of that company. And then they create a charity in another country and put it in the name of that company. Then they create a business in another company and put it in that company. 114 times. You have to have a lot of persistence in order to be able to track those down. It takes time and it takes persistence. But when you do track it down, your rewards are oftentimes not great. You close off the conduit for the corruption, but oftentimes the person is not brought to justice. So then what they do is they find another avenue for laundering their money. And so we have our day-to-day operations, which are trying to find how this money is laundered, where this money is laundered, the people that are involved in it. But then we have our real mission, which is to understand why people do this, how the environment in which they're raised allows them to think that this is okay. Because as we all know, for those of us that are at least quasi-normal, it's not okay.
در بخش‌های مختلف ایران از جمله در حوزه کارون و فلات مرکزی می‌بینیم که آب از حوزه پرآبتر به مناطق کم آبتر منتقل شده، اما این انتقال آب به قیمت فقر آبی مبدأ و مشکلات بزرگ مقصد تموم شده. مردم مناطقی که آب به سویشون هدایت میشه اول کار خوشحالند، اما بعدتر به این نتیجه میرسن که کل کار به ضرر اونها بوده. مؤسساتی مثل یونیشگاه که در ردیابی فساد فعالیت دارن چگونه میتونن مردمی رو آگاه کنند که بعدها قربانی همین بازی‌های حکومتی خواهند شد.
And this kind of harkens back to what I was saying at the beginning, which is just like leaders, I don't want to even use the word leaders, just like politically exposed people that climb to the top, what they do is they divide the people and they divide that narrative. And what we have to do is we have to educate ourselves and all speak with the same narrative so that we're not blaming each other for these issues, that we find where the root of the problem is and we focus on that. Let me give you an example in Esfahan. In Esfahan, if you talk to the farmers, there are many of them that are blaming the industry in Esfahan because the industry has engaged in the same thing that they do in the United States or Western Europe, which is regulatory capture. They make significant contributions or payments to members of parliament or the Majlis, and as a consequence, they get favorable regulatory regulations. And then money is diverted into the industry, which then causes the farmers to blame the industry. Now, at the same time, there are people that don't have access to clean water. Well, they are in turn blaming the farmers for planting crops that are heavy in water use or that they're not using efficient farming techniques. And those efficiencies are brought out by the government. And you can see how all of these people get divided about who they should be blaming. And it's not really a blame game, it's understanding what the root of the problem is. And the root of the problem is when you don't have leadership. I do not care what country you're in, whether it's the United States or whether it's Europe or whether it's Asia or whether it's Iran. If you do not have leadership that cares for the people and is looking out for the best interest of the people, that's when you have this divided narrative And what you have is you have the people suffering for the oligarchs that control the government.
همین چندی پیش سری زدیم به سدهایی که برداشته شده بودن از روی رودخانه کلامات در شمال کالیفرنیا. مردم ایران معتقدند که بسیاری از سدهایی که ساخته شدند قاتل رودخانه ها و منابع آبهای سطحی هستند. اگر بخوان این سدها برداشته بشه چه روندی رو بایستی طی کنند؟
So it's good that you brought up the Klamath River, because in this particular instance you had a unified minority. You had the United States Native American population in the region that has lived there for, oh my goodness, 10,000 years or so, 20,000 years. And as a people, they remember what the rivers were like. And so, to be honest, even I as a kid remember what the rivers were like. And so what they did is they band together and they petitioned the government, and they kept the pressure up in the government year after year after year. They did not, go try and use violence. What they did is they tried to use political pressure, and eventually they were successful. The politicians finally heard their voice because they spoke with one voice. This gets back to what I was talking about earlier, is uniting the narrative. If everyone speaks with one voice, they will hear the voice. Part of what these individuals do that are, I don't like to use the word leaders, because a leader indicates that you're doing something for the people. And oftentimes that's not the case. But these politicians will divide the people in order to advance their own interests. But if the people speak with one voice, I do not care whether you're in the United States or you're in Iran, you will have an impact. So unite your voice, and then take your voice to the politicians and speak to them. And I would also like to say another really important thing about removing these dams, and the dams that have been built in Iran since 1979. There have been, I believe, over 500 dams constructed since 1979. And many of these were built during the Ahmadinejad period. And one of the problems that we have, in addition to the grievous environmental impacts that have occurred, is, again, they use substandard materials. So instead of using, for example, Portland cement, they would go to Pakistan or India and use a lesser grade cement. The problem with this is, when the engineers designed the dam, it was designed to hold this pressure based upon the type of rebar, the type of cement, etc., that they are using. If you're using a lesser grade of rebar or using a lesser grade of cement, it means that the structure has significant structural, or could have significant structural deficiencies. And so you are faced with something like we might see with the Mosul Dam in Iraq, where at any time, if there is a major flood, these dams, any of these dams, one of these dams could give way and end up killing thousands of people. And of course, it'll be a big tragedy at the time, and they'll ask for international help, and they'll ask for money from the international community. The problem is, we could have solved the problem at the get-go by eradicating, or there's no such thing as eradicating corruption, reducing corruption. And we need to go back now to those dams, evaluate them, evaluate which ones are actually useful or which ones need to be removed. We also need to test the concrete and the rebar to eliminate those that had corruption in the construction, so that we can save those thousands and thousands of people that could potentially be killed when, don't mistake, I'm not saying if, I'm saying when one of these dams gives way.
شما به عنوان کسی که با خیلی از جوامعی که قربانی فساد و ضعف‌های محیط زیستی بوده اند، با چه مشکلاتی مواجه شدید و واقعا برای رفع بسیار از این مشکلات چه باید کرد؟
one of the issues that we are facing, especially in repressive countries, is that people are not educated in corruption, or they're not educated in the environment or in water. And so the number one thing that people can do is educate themselves by taking training if it's available, getting online. YouTube is a wonderful place. Now, granted, there's a lot of stuff that's on YouTube that is not factual, but you have to do research, which means do not look at one video or two videos. Look at a consensus of videos. There are many universities or trusted individuals such as yourself that put out videos that talk about the environment, that talk specifically about the environment in Iran. Stanford University has a number of research papers that they put out that are focused on Iran. So research those. Take training classes when they're made available to you. You offer training classes in Iran. We offer training classes. There are a number of people that offer training classes about either how to deal with, how to be effective in fighting corruption, or how to be effective in protecting the environment. When our narrative is united, there's no question that we will be successful. And eventually, even if it's the last person standing, we will be successful because people will see the degradation that's happening in the world today.
در سالهای اخیر بحث قانون مگنیتسکی برای مبارزه با فساد بین‌المللی زیاد مطرح شده. آیا فکر می‌کنید می‌توان از قانون مگنیتسکی برای مبارزه با فساد در بخش آب هم استفاده کرد؟
Absolutely. So Global Magnitsky is a wonderful tool. So let's start with the post designation. So oftentimes what we have is the individuals that are going to get sanctioned under Global Magnitsky's are part of the oligarchs, right? They are, whether it's the American oligarchs or the Russian oligarchs or the Iranian oligarchs, those are the people with money. Those are the people that have the control. So they are the ones that get sanctioned. And as a consequence, if they cannot move their money internationally, or their money is threatened internationally, they are going to take great interest in resolving the issues. So Global Magnitsky has a real impact. Now, what needs to happen is individuals need to get smart in both those environmental impacts that rise to the level of a human rights violation, and those issues that are only not regulatorily allowed, or that are inappropriate but don't rise to the level of a human rights violation. Once they are educated in that by, for example, videos that you put out or that others put out, I would always check the UNDP sites, for example, or UNODC that offers videos as well. Once they understand that, we offer training, as do a number of other organizations, on how to put together the files to be able to empower civil society so that they can make their case as to why this individual or this organization should be sanctioned under Global Magnitsky. And so I would urge people to get involved in this. And what is so nice about this, you can do this 100% anonymously. You do not need to be identified in this process. Why? Because it is fact-based research. If you can provide the fact-based research, then they are going to validate your research, so it doesn't matter what your name is. What is important is that you provide fact-based research, and then they will take action, and they will begin to sanction the oligarchs that are behind this type of heinous corruption.
در پایان به امید حقیقتیابی و کشف واقعیت‌های مرتبط با آب و محیط زیست و درس گرفتن از خطاها برای رسیدن به جامعه‌ای پایدار و زندگی محور، جامعه‌ای که حرمت جان انسان و طبیعت را پاس می‌دارد و از نیستی به سوی هستی می‌رود. تا درودی دیگر، بدرود.